The top 25 players under 25 years old in the NFL. What about those Packers wide receivers? We know which ones to buy stock in 2024 and beyond. Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making this your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We appreciate all the everydayers out there, and we especially love it when you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. We're talking 25 under 25. We had John Costco on the podcast earlier on in the week, Matt, talking about the top 30 players over the age of 30, giving the old guys some love in the NFL. But taking a look at PFF's list today on the younger guys, the 25 players under the age of 25 entering the 2024 season. And look, it's nice to have players on both lists, but this is the list you want players on, right? Young, superstar players in the NFL that you can build around for a decade.
100%. And I'm curious, I mean, as you were saying that, I was thinking, a lot of these companies, I think I used to write it when I did ESPN, when I worked for ESPN, and you see this pretty often this time of year. Like, give me the best guys under a certain age, usually 25. And I wonder if we went back over the last, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, how many of these guys actually panned out? Like what percentage of them turned into legit stars or fizzled out? Because you'd think at this stage, you got a couple years under your belt, like these guys on the list. They're pretty established, but they have their best years ahead of them. And, there's the Mahomeses and guys like that, of course. But I bet there's some, Wentz was on there one day, I'm sure. And I mean, I'm sure some guys fizzle out too.
Right. And there's a lot of guys in the early parts of their careers, year two, and they're not finished products yet. And maybe that goes a different direction.
Yeah.
The last name on the list is Kyle Pitts. There's probably players that are rookies, and there's no rookies on this list that are definitely under 25 that I'd probably take over Kyle Pitts too. So, and some of these guys have to make
maybe even Brock Bowers.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got to talk about the Detroit Lions. I mean, my goodness, we're going to talk a lot about buying stock. We're talking Packers wide receivers here in a little bit and how to navigate that, and specifically kind of in your fantasy leagues this year. But Penei Sewell's number one. He just got a huge contract. He was really young, true junior coming into the NFL, so he's already re-upped, and he's still not turning 24 years old until October, which is kind of crazy. Was PFF's highest graded right tackle in the league last year. Led actually all offensive linemen at any position in run blocking grades. So kind of wild what the what Penei Sewell has done early on in his career. And then you combine that with three guys in the top 11. They come back with number 6 on the list, Aiden Hutchinson. Then you have number 11 on the list, Amon-Ra St. Brown, also getting new contract, also just turning 25 years old this year. Then you have where we go, we're scrolling down the list. We have Sam Laporta, 19 on the list, and Jahmyr Gibbs right behind him at 21. They got 5 of the top 25 players under the age of 25 in the NFL on this team. I mean, the Detroit Lions have arrived, and they might be good for a long time. Also, they like their quarterback quite a bit and just gave him some more money too.
As I was saying, their quarterback's expensive, but he's in place. So a couple of notes here is, we had that conversation earlier in the week with the 30 over 30, and it just so happens an offensive tackle was number 1 on that list as well. So I think it goes to show, and there's plenty examples that great tackles can last a very long time. And, you mentioned Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase coming in that year after COVID when all the tape we watched of them was 18-year-olds at Oregon and LSU. I mean, that's crazy talk. Now, I think you have to be very excited about where the Lions are now and where they should be for a long term. But I do think you and I are to blame for this as well. But remember that draft last year when they drafted Gibbs and Branch, who's a really good player, the linebacker out of Iowa, and, all these, and Laporta, and I just flat out said, I love these players, but they're not drafting positions, premium positions, with all these first round picks, all these early picks. And they're sure making it work. I mean, it sure looks like I was wrong for criticizing that draft as harshly as I did. That being said, there will be a day when you have to pay Hutchinson, and now Sewell's paid, but a left tackle or some of these, a corner, that maybe you won't have the money because you invested so heavily in non-premium positions. Well, I just think it's a conversation.
Yeah, yes and no on that, because they hit on, and I still like their second round picks better than their first round picks, right? And I did from day one. But
Branch is great.
You know who else is on this list is the other running back that went in the first round. Like you want a player on this list, draft a first round running back, and it was like, okay, cool, he's good, but
that's a great point.
He's probably not going to be on the 30 over 30 list. You know what I mean?
That's a great point, right? Well, I mean, if you draft a first round running back and he's not on this list, shame on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like and that's almost like the baseline.
And it's important to hit on your guys. So if you are going to go away from premier positions, you got to at least hit on your guys. And we'll see what happens to Jack Campbell at linebacker, but the other three are for sure hits of those first and second round picks for the Lions last year, for sure.
And they're in a great spot. I mean, I think every team's probably pretty jealous of the Lions right now with their young talent base.
New York Jets not looking bad either. Have a couple of players in the top 10 here, with number 2 on the list, cornerback Sauce Gardner, and then coming back around with number 9 in wide receiver Garrett Wilson, who's on his way to stardom there for the New York Jets at wide receiver. And we didn't get to see that Aaron Rodgers to Garrett Wilson connection last year, but it could be a thing this year. And Wilson, according to PFF, still 19th among wide receivers over the last 2 seasons. His only 2 seasons in the NFL as far as PFF grades go, and that's with awful quarterback play.
Yeah, and I mean, anyone watch the Hard Knocks of these two going at it every day in a really competitive but friendly and respectful way was really enjoyable that year. And then Rodgers gets hurt right away. I think Sauce is easily a top 5 corner, maybe even 2. I mean, Surtain to me is number 1, but Sauce is right there in that conversation. There's been some rumblings. They've been a left-right corner team. There's been some rumblings that Sauce might travel this year. I have mixed feelings about that, but I
utilize your talent to the best way it helps you. Maybe sometimes you should do that. Maybe sometimes it doesn't help as much.
That's probably the best way to do it, because Reed's good too.
Right. Yeah. And they're not bad on the other side. I mean, that's a really good defense over there. But Sauce is different. And if you've got somebody like, if you're playing the Minnesota Vikings, put him on Jefferson. Right. Yeah. But if you're playing a team that's pretty even, that's ambidextrous at wide receiver, you feel like you're ambidextrous on defense, then play one guy on one side.
I'm fine with that. I mean, it just the reason I'm saying mixed feelings is if it's not broke, don't fix it. And the one thing people don't think about when you have a corner that follows is the other 10 then have to adjust, as opposed to, but then they can attack you easier and, yada, yada. But anyway, Garrett Wilson to me is like, we talk about him on Locked On Dynasty all the time. Like, he's a first round dynasty fantasy player. I mean, he produces with bad quarterbacks, let alone give him somebody decent.
Oh yeah. Oh, he's legit. He's legit talent. Can get open, ball skills, everything you want in an NFL wide receiver. I have a problem with this list immediately at number 3 with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I thought that's a little rich.
CJ Stroud, and I like Trevor Lawrence, but if we're buying stock and if we are redrafting, I think CJ Stroud goes ahead of Trevor Lawrence all day long, Matt.
I do too, and I feel like I make too many excuses for Lawrence, but I don't think anything that, even this past year, their offense has been really broken with no protection and drops. But I think if you're asking me who do I want from here on out, Stroud or Lawrence, I think I take Stroud. And frankly, I'm surprised Lawrence is ahead of Jamar Chase, who's next on this list. But Chase could be 1.
I mean, it's hard to keep going down the list, and you're like, man, I can't believe this guy's that low. But then you look at who else is above him. It's like, okay, well, yeah, it's Jamar Chase. And Trevor Lawrence does belong on this list. Kyle Hamilton comes in at number 5, which is actually a little bit surprising. Not surprising he's on the list, but skyrocketing in year 2 for him, or after year 2 for him with the Baltimore Ravens. The most disrespectful is Brock Purdy not being number 1. He's all the way down at number 9, number 8 on this list, man.
You can't complain too much being the third quarterback on this list. I mean, that's not too shabby for Purdy. Yeah. I like it. One other thing I wanted to say about Sauce, just to backtrack, is we made the observation a couple days ago, no corners on the old man list. Well, there's definitely corners on the young man list,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a young man's position for sure.
Yep.
And running back, too. There's a couple of those, twice as many running backs and a bunch more cornerbacks. Trent McDuffie of the Kansas City Chiefs in the top 10 here. Real quick on Brock Purdy. It's the opposite factor for Brock Purdy that he's dealing with that Trevor Lawrence is dealing with. Everyone's trying to make excuses for Trevor Lawrence. And I do make excuses for him as well. And I think some of them are valid. But to this point, Brock Purdy's played better. And everyone's trying to make excuses. Sure. The other reason why it's not because of him, why he's not as good. But if you just say who's been better as under 25 guys, Purdy's been better.
He has. He's had a better career than Trevor Lawrence. I think that's inarguable right now. Now, everyone does this. I do this. This is something we can do in May. What if we would flop their situations? Of course, it would be different. And that's true for every quarterback out there. But we can't do that. Then you just have to evaluate the tape that they put out on Sundays. And Purdy's has been better.
Yeah. Purdy throws a more catchable ball. Those drops would disappear in Jacksonville if Purdy Patrick Surtain, 13. Is there that big of a gap between Patrick Surtain and Sauce Gardner for you, Matt?
I have Surtain ahead of him in on the my cornerback list, and maybe he'd even be one on this list.
There you go. All right. I can't believe Javon Holland, Miami Dolphins safety, is still under 25.
Yeah, that's a great one too. Boy, I mean, I really like Holland and Hamilton as do-it-all safeties. We kind of glanced over Hamilton, and maybe he's a little high, but they play him in the slot. They play him everywhere. Like those pieces are unbelievably valuable, and Holland has a lot of those traits too, where what does he do poorly? The answer is really nothing.
Yep. Positionless football in the NFL. When you have one of those guys, it's so valuable. Next, Matt, let's talk Packers wide receivers. No Packers on that list, but they do have a lot of really good young wide receivers. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Watson was on the list last year.
Probably.
Let's talk Packers wide receivers, who we buying stock in the NFL, in their careers long-term, but in your fantasy leagues in 2024 as well. Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights. I just got some wiper blades. I've got a fender flare as well that popped off on the freeway when I ran over a traffic cone that was right in the middle of the lane. Big green check, guaranteed fit. It was the fit, and it could not be easier to find one of over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. So you're burning rubber and not cash with eBay Motors. And level yourself up, right? Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. The Green Bay Packers have a number of young wide receivers on their roster. And I want to start with an OTA report out of Green Bay. And I've had to double take because I'm a little bit shocked by this report. And Christian Watson has been dogged by injuries, specifically hamstring issues, since he's been in the NFL. But apparently Christian Watson went down to University of Wisconsin, Madison, went down to Madison to along with teammate Eric Stokes, by the way, to find out what the cause of their hamstring issues are. And for Watson specifically, they found out that the difference between his left and right leg muscle mass, and it's the right leg he's been having problems with, his right leg has 20% less mass on it than his left leg. So since he found that out, he's been trying to build up his right leg. He's getting it closer to 10%. He's trying to get it to only a 6% difference this year if he can. I don't know how you don't just notice that when you're standing there and
when you take a shower, right?
It's not noticeable that one leg's 20% has 20% less muscle mass than the other.
So that begs this bigger question that we don't have the answer to, and brings us back to our bring on a somebody that's great at training folks like this. Is this common in all humans? Is this common amongst athletes? You said his right one is skinnier than his left. Is he left-handed / left-footed? Did he play a lot of soccer at some point? Does he run all outbreaking routes to his left? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
is he
a lot of people, and actually, this is one that hits home for me because I've kind of lost some mass in my right leg, and I really notice it. It's because I've had a right knee issue, and I've stayed off
that
my
would make
right
sense,
leg
yeah.
a lot recently, and I've had to hit it a little bit harder at the gym to try to get it back. And one day you're just looking at your two legs together, and you realize, oh man, my right quad is really sort of atrophied a little bit compared to my left side. And for a lot of right-handed people, they're actually left-footed jumpers, right? It's like it's the
I
opposite.
think so, yeah.
Correct. And so that might be part of it. But 20% seems like a lot for somebody
Seems
who
insane.
is in this situation, because this happened to me when I'm approaching 40 years old. When it started, it wasn't something that's happened to me when I was 25. So
And you're not running routes every day.
right. And it's a cumulative effect in a
Right,
long
yeah.
time. Like it
Yeah.
took a decade to get there. I don't know how this happens, but stock is kind of down on Watson because of some of these things. If this fixes his problem and his hamstring injuries are behind him, then stock is way up. And I'm kind of buying where you get to draft Christian Watson right now, as far as being in this Packers offense with Jordan Love. Maybe he's a sleeper out there for what he could be if he's healthy for 17 games.
Hey, one more question about this. Again, that's unanswerable for me or you, but he's had all these hamstring injuries, and I assume the Green Bay Packers have a training staff that has tended to his injuries. Didn't they notice one was bigger than the other when they're rubbing him down or taping him up, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you would think it would be like, this is kind of odd, Christian.
If I'm Matt LaFleur and I get this report, I look at my training staff with a side eye and I'm like, hey guys, this is something that you have to catch.
Right.
It's something that isn't as noticeable than it sounds like it would be.
Maybe we all do. I don't know, but seems like a professional NFL staff would catch this.
And I saw some folks responding to this tweet, and somebody put a photo out there, and it looks like it's just a photo of him running routes, like in practice, or I can't remember what it was, but you can see both of his legs. One looks way smaller than the other.
Wow, that's so weird. Like, did he have a kickball career that we don't know about or something? I don't know. Anyway, we talked about 25 under 25. Green Bay is loaded with young talent. They're the youngest roster in the league. Last year, I assume they still, project to be. I love their two tight ends, but man, their receiver room is crowded. Like, what's the pecking order there?
So my favorite guy is Dontayvion Wicks. He was phenomenal as a rookie last year as a 5th-round pick. I liked him a lot pre-draft. He was a big, he was one of our guys for me and Eric Crocker on the Locked On 49ers podcast before the draft last year. And I'm not surprised that he looked really good as a rookie. My question is, does he have the opportunity? Has he already won that other starting outside wide receiver job to go across from Christian Watson ahead of Romeo Doubs? Because that's the big one for me. Because if he is, I'm buying all the stock in the world in Dontayvion Wicks, especially where he's being drafted in fantasy drafts. And Jaden Reed is a really good player in the 2nd round from that draft, but he's more of the slot guy too. So, and if Watson's healthy, that's a scary 1, 2, 3. And then you still have Doubs, who's, the 4th guy there. That is a ton of talent. The guy I would buy stock in because of how low it is and how much more it could rise, though, is Dontayvion Wicks to me.
I hear you. Although I will tell you, in the dynasty community, that stock is going through the roof already. The secret's out. There's no question. I think Watson is still my favorite. The only thing I'm certain about is Doubs is 4. He's never really been for me, to be honest with you. And
he's kind of a
monotone guy.
He's not a big target share player, and he's good, making catches down the field. I don't think the volume is ever going to be there for Doubs, even if he wins the starting job. The problem is, is the ball going to be spread around enough where none of them are huge values in fantasy leagues. And if you ask me just which one would you want, and you don't have to worry about where you draft them, ADP or auction value or whatever, give me Christian Watson, especially with this news, if this is something he can fix with his injuries and his hamstring injuries, because he could be a dynamic player, right? True number 1 there. But if you're basing it on where they're going in drafts currently, and obviously Wicks, like you mentioned, is kind of climbing, give me Dontayvion Wicks.
I hear you. I hear you. And he might be the second best on their best day. He could even be the best on his best day. I think he is that good. I think Bo Melton's also a nice player. If that's your 5 or 4, or maybe they could trade Dobbs for a 3rd-round pick or something like that. I don't know. But I think the answer for fantasy is give me Jordan Love, because I like those tight ends too.
Right. Yeah, betting on the upside of Jordan Love for sure. Nice problem to have there for
It is.
man, a team that just is really. You were talking to me off the air. It's like, could a team come calling for one of those wide receivers?
I would make some sense. I mean, nobody has a deeper group of pass catchers, and nobody has a younger or cheaper group of pass catchers. I mean, they have nothing invested in wide receiver and tight end, and they're going to catch a bazillion balls in those two positions.
Man, and so you have the young quarterback, a fairly young quarterback still in Jordan Love. You got Luke Musgrave at tight end, and he's backed up by Tucker Kraft, who was a 3rd-round pick in last year's draft. Looked like they really hit on all their pass catchers last year. Then you've got Zach Tom coming into his own as an offensive lineman, could probably start at all 5 positions on that line, but then they came back and drafted Jordan Morgan in the 1st round this year to play left tackle so that Zach Tom can most likely play center. I mean, that is just a crazy young offense, but really talented.
Really is. And I always go back to this with the Packers, and the streak was finally broken, but they went like a million years, with the exception of Jordan Love, of not using a 1st-round pick on offense. And now they've one of the best young offenses in the league. I mean, you got to give the coaches some credit too for developing these guys, and as well as the drafters, of course. And maybe Lloyd, the young running back, could be the guy next year. I don't think Jacobs is going to be there over a year.
Right. Yeah. Maybe a little
Brady
running back there in Josh Jacobs, different style than Marshawn Lloyd. Probably, if we're doing all underrated team, Matt LaFleur probably deserves to be in that conversation, because I don't know if he gets the credit he deserves for what he's done there in Green Bay, no matter who the quarterback is.
It certainly didn't when Rodgers was there. He didn't get they won 13 games every year.
And imagine if they figured it out with their defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, this year.
I was thinking the same thing, because there's a ton of 1st-round picks on that side of the ball that are also young, and they go add, a million safeties and linebackers and Xavier McKinney. And I'm rooting for Hafley. I'm not sure, other than Matt Canada, there was a more hated coordinator than the Packers DC.
Yeah.
I mean, that's high on the list last year. So even if they're just league average on that side of the ball, could be a big deal.
All right, next, Roger Goodell, the commish, hinting about an 18-game season in the near future for the NFL. Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access all the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. And when it comes to your financial future, you've done everything right. Like, you've done it all already. You've saved and you've researched and you've invested. Well, now you take it to the next level with Yahoo Finance. It's the #1 finance destination, producing holistic looks at financial news cycles, breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. So go where over 90 million users each month go, and where some of the best investors go. That is yahoofinance.com. Comprehensive financial news and analysis. Visit the brand behind every great investor. The #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. This from NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, Matt, on an 18-game schedule. He said, quote, "The key for us is looking at making sure we continue to do the things that make our game safer. So we want to make sure that that hits the first boundary. 17 games is a long season, so we want to continue the safety efforts. You've seen a lot of outcomes of that. Kickoffs are a good example of that, the hip drop. So we're going to continue to do that. That's #1. Working with our Players Association is #2. We would reach an agreement with them, and if we're going to proceed on that, we'd reach an agreement with them if we're going to proceed on that. But also, third, and this is not necessarily in order, is the quality of our game. We would do it in the context of reducing the number of preseason games. We think that's a good trade. Less preseason games and more regular season games. I think most anybody would think that would be beneficial. But again, those are the other two factors that are important. And as far as timeline, he said, I think I was asked about the idea of playing Saturday night. So the idea of it was really just a reaction to the other alternatives to playing on Saturday night. So a lot of potential outcomes here. I would assume a second bye comes from this. Adam Schefter talked about how he sees in the future that potentially every team in the league would play one international game every year rather than having like one international team. So you would kind of get a full season of international games, but just in different places and with various teams around the NFL. So kind of getting a little glimpse of what the future of the NFL might look like.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I think it's coming. And you've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, the schedule release show, all that stuff, that we could be seeing more days of the week being utilized, which I think is certainly on the horizon. I've been on a soapbox, I think, for a decade about 2 bye weeks, and people seem to brush it off. But my biggest problem with the current situation is I don't think you should ever play Sunday and then Thursday. And if you had 2 byes, you could set it up that never happens. If you're truly worried about player safety, those road teams on Thursdays are really at a disadvantage. And any player will tell you, I definitely have more risk to injury, and I get the crap beat out of me those weeks.
Is high school football the only reason they don't play on Fridays instead of Thursdays? Like Friday, obviously, it's an extra day. It's a superior day to have a game, I think. I mean, I know different areas of the country look at high school football differently. I know for me personally, I haven't been to a high school football game since I was in high school, and I will not go to another high school football game unless my son's playing in a high school football game, right? That's the only I do not care at all about it. And a lot of places it's like, do people really, really care about high school football in the places that would be the most into those professional games? It's like the places that are most into college football and high school football are the places that don't have the pro teams, it seems like to me. And so
yes and no. I mean, my recruiting background, Florida, it's huge. Texas, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, around here, it's quite big. I mean, like Pittsburgh, Ohio, Western PA. That being said, if the Steelers played one Friday night game, it's not like they're going to play there every week. You know what I mean? I mean, if the Niners are playing the Bears and you want to go to the local Pittsburgh high school game, go, and watch that game on your phone while you're in the stands. It's not like you can't do all the above anymore. So I'm with you. I think Friday night games should come. 2 concerns, though, about, first of all, I do think you'd have to the latest CBA, when that came out, I was shocked they didn't have 2 preseason games. I'm shocked that it was still 3.
I thought it was coming already. I don't really see an argument for either side. I would think both sides would want that because you still have games.
Yeah,
there's still NFL games. It's not like you're losing a week of football, and in fact, you're actually gaining a week of football overall if you're elongating the season by a week.
So, would we start training camps a week earlier? Would opening day be a week earlier? I always worry about going too far into the winter because weather gets so brutal in some places. You know what I mean? I mean, would we see more domes in Green Bay and Chicago and things like that in the future? Or at least retractables
There's an extra bye week for every team. Can we squash the week before the Super Bowl? I hate that extra week.
I hate that week too. Another thing that makes me crazy, but I do think it's one of the best things that came out of COVID were massively expanded practice squads. But why can't we have a 60-man roster? I mean, can't these teams afford $7 million a year more salary? That's like nothing. Yeah, and half those guys would be league minimum guys, and you know what I mean? And just have more of a rotation, more specialists, 5 or 6 safeties on your team, I mean, things like that. Like we could make these rosters pretty big, guys. Yeah,
right.
I think they can afford the extra shoes and gear and salaries and helmets.
I would say, and you know what? It's actually not had as big of an impact as I thought. But another game could be a little bit more, and just the running back value and the attrition that happens at the running back position. Like, do you essentially get to the point where like, okay, you have to be at least a 2 running back team? Like you have to have like a double bell cow situation, or else you'll just never make it through a full season.
So I was listening to the GM Shuffle that I always do, Mike Lombardi's, and it was on this morning, or I had it on this morning before we hit record here. And they were sort of talking about this, but the big topic they bringing up was load management. I'm not familiar with other sports enough, but I understand the Pirates have this great young pitcher, Paul Skeens, but he's on a dead pitch count. When he hits the exact number, they're pulling him, even if he has a no-hitter going. I know the NBA does this stuff, where they really load manage things. Maybe the NFL needs to go more that direction. I mean, it's obviously hard with quarterbacks and O-line, but hey, Cam Hayward, you're sitting out this series whether you like it or not. You know what I mean?
I think the load management in the NFL
yeah.
happens during the practice week more so than on game
Big
day.
time.
Yeah.
It's just hard for coaches to not put their best guy out there.
Yeah,
tie game.
That would have to be something else because the coaches aren't going to do it.
No, the coaches are
and the players don't want to come off the field a lot of times either. So
right,
you have to save them from themselves. You have to, it has to be part of the rules if that's going to happen. But I would say more, and that's where an off day comes in, right? A recovery week, another recovery week for the players on your team, and is that make a bigger difference than playing a few less snaps during a game throughout the year? I would think it would. And
that's why I also like the bigger rosters. If you could just supplement your third safety in there with the starters 6 plays a game. You know what I mean?
One thing you don't want if you're the league is quarterbacks hurt a lot. And we're seeing more backup quarterbacks play than ever. You want the marquee quarterbacks out there. And if they're starting to get hurt and now you got backup quarterbacks all the time, you're getting to a baseball pitching rotation. The league definitely doesn't want that.
No, I think that's one of their biggest issues, and it's a hard thing to solve. Is over the last 2 years, there's been between 60 and 70 starters per year in the league. Some teams with 4 and 5. Like, that can't happen. People aren't going to watch that.
What do you think? 18-game schedule, international games for everybody every year. I like the international games, so I wouldn't be completely opposed to it, especially if teams kind of had their own little home area. The 49ers, like kind of Mexico City's been their thing. Do they get their one game every other year? They're home in Mexico City. And then a different team has that kind of home environment. We see the Jaguars in London. It's become their second home. I would kind of like that.
I don't know that most people know about it because I just kind of learned over the last year, and I only know this because I'm so closely affiliated with the Steelers, but the league grants different areas of the world to teams. Like, Ireland is the Steelers. Mr. Rooney was the ambassador to Ireland.
Wow. Just like your local TV rights or your local area. Okay.
That already exists. Like, I think the Niners are high on the list. Dallas is super high on the list. But the Steelers have like 4 different countries that are Steeler Nation. Like they can advertise there. And they, like I've been on the Irish podcast for the Steelers, that's affiliated with the team. It's crazy. Wow. Yeah.
That is crazy.
So I bet that kind of stuff is coming even more. But it's kind of under the surface now, but every team does have specific international connections.
Thanks, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. More notes from around the NFL next week, and let us know what you want us to talk about. Get those questions in for next week's mailbag episode on Wednesday at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Drop a comment on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed up there and everywhere you listen to your podcast. Matt and I back Monday right here. Peacock and Williamson.